Good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to CAHO webinar on NABL accreditation on RT-PCR RNA virus testing. To all the delegates, very warm welcome. I have a special welcome to our speakers. We have very interesting, very senior speakers for today's webinar on NABL accreditation for RT-PCR. First, we have Dr. Venkateswaran, CEO and Director of our NABL, Chief. And Dr. Ashvini Gupta, Senior Consultant and Quality Head, Media Super Specialty Hospital from Kolkata. She is representing the assessees, like most of you who are going to listen to us. And Dr. Jayalakshmi, who is representing NABL as an accreditation, assessor. She is Professor, Department of Microbiology at PSG Institute of Medical Sciences and Research, Coimbatore. Today is a very special day for all of us because today is World Environment Day also. Therefore, let me wish all of you the World Environment Day, in which our warriors, NABL warriors, the laboratory representative assessors, our warriors, the assessors, are going to make our environment safer to live through very logical analysis of how many COVID patients are around and handing them over to clinicians to take care of them. Welcome once again on this World Environment Day. Very, very nice day our CAHO has selected. Safety, health and environment is a buzzword today. If the environment is clean without COVID virus and we are all safe, we all remain healthy. And for this, we have experts to discuss with all the delegates. Delegates will come with a lot of questions, I'm sure. Our speaker's presentation itself will solve most of their questions. We'll give them the solution. Once again, I welcome. Now, I welcome Dr. Venkateswaran, CEO NABL, talk about role of NABL in quality testing for COVID-19 in the country. Yes, Venkateswaran, please.
Very good evening to everybody. And happy World Environment Day. And first, I would like to thank the organizers, CAHO, for this opportunity to address all of you, to talk something what is that known to me, and what is the role of NABL in this quality testing, and that too importantly regarding medical, that too where this COVID testing is happening, where NABL is contributing on RT-PCR RNA virus testing. First, I would like to tell you that I have been CEO of NABL for the last 1 year. So it's a 1 year period for me to understand what all things are happening around and how the process can get improved upon, where all the quality things needs to be pitched in. So I'm basically a mechanical engineer and I got around 25 years of experience in this particular field. And at least from accreditation body, I am there around 17 years. So I have seen all the particular steps on entire accreditation process. So that's one added advantage for me on being in this hot seat. And having said this, that NABL now is a constituent board of Quality Council of India, which is coming as an autonomous body under Department of Industrial Policy Promotion, is now termed as DPIIT, and it is registered under Societies Act. This is our legal status or identity is concerned. And for some of them, these programs, whatever NABL has started, it is from 1981, it was there. And then first accreditation NABL is granted in 1992 under NCTCF program. So that was an old program. At 1998, NABL got registered. At that time, we are registered as a society under Department of Science and Technology. But in 2017, recently, we have got transferred to DPIIT and then to QCI. And now we are a constituent board of Quality Council of India. So per se, accreditation, if we are talking about, it's a third-party attestation, which is related to conformity assessment body, where we are giving a formal demonstration of competence of a laboratory, where they are carrying out specific conformity task. So today's thing, wherever you are all interested, is about RT-PCR RNA testing, where NABL is granting accreditation on ISO 15189 standard. So NABL grants accreditation apart from this 15189 medical under testing also 17025 ISO IEC 17025 standard. And then we also started giving accreditation for ISO IEC 17043 for PT provider. And then we also started for ISO 17034 reference material producer accreditation. So these are the areas where we are giving accreditation. So now coming back to this situation of COVID is concerned, or our role, what is that we are doing it? What is the need for this? And what is the objective on this? And then what is the uniqueness of online assessment, what we are trying to do? I mean, nowadays we are doing assessments remotely. And then what is the process? What is the timelines we have followed? And then who all are NABL officers involved into this? And what is the commitment we have got on this? Is what just I thought of, having a word or taking some 10 minutes time out of this particular schedule, because I have been given 10 minutes time so that if there are a lot number of questions, I can answer onto that. So mainly the accreditation need is very importantly, a confidence is required for anybody who are wanting testing. So the confidence measure is on accreditation. The lab will ensure giving accurate, reliable and reproducible test results. This is the more vital part of the lab's results, what they are going to give. This is the main need. Second thing is everybody as a user, we will require a positive as a positive, negative as a negative results. This is what everybody looks for, so that there is no false negative or false positive kind of situation shouldn't get arised on that. And the second objective or a need is to achieve a consistency and uniformity in the results or the measurement data, whatever it is being done. And then third is again the customer requirement, what they wanted, whether that is being they are getting it or not. So in this present situation, ICMR is the regulator where they have relied upon NABL accreditation for the confidence what the system is happening for the all private laboratories. So all these private laboratories goes for NABL accreditation, and we are doing that particular process. Now, what is that specially we have did for this as a COVID measures are concerned? That's what everybody asks us this question. So we have created a new portal onto this in our website, where the new laboratories, whoever wanted to go in for a quick reviews on what they have got the facilities and what is that they are doing it. So they need to fill out a form which will be shared by other speaker also. So I'll just put up on the overall template or how we are giving accreditation. So the first step is we require an application. There are accredited labs and applicant labs. Both have to submit an application form for what exactly they wanted a scope. So to do a COVID testing, they need to get recognized or approved by ICMR. So to get ICMR's approval, they need to get NABL accreditation. So NABL accreditation mainly focuses on other RNA virus like HCV, H1N1, influenza virus. So these are all the things what the labs can take up accreditation, and then they can approach ICMR, take the permission, and then start COVID testing. So this is the steps what it is being followed. So when NABL is coming, once the lab submits the application to us, as normal application where we take it, we are taking it from the portal, and we get a lot of declarations from the lab. So at the initial time itself, on the documentation part or management system part, the declaration is what we take from them, and we accept onto the declaration so that the lab owns that yes, they are up to the mark and they are following the requirements of the standard. So based on the declaration, we do a quick document review, whether the documents, whatever been submitted by the laboratory is in order or not in order. So once we find that yes, the documents are in order, then we plan for a pre-preparedness check, because at this particular point of time where there is a breakdown, we will not be able to go on site and then do that particular assessments. So we thought of doing it by remotely, where the lab will have a lot of facilities with them through the video conferencing mode. They'll be able to show us each and every locations, what exactly they are doing. So NABL team does that particular activity of seeing it onto the screen that yes, whether the lab will be able to show us fully and whether they are prepared fully or not. So we call it as pre-preparedness check. So once this pre-preparedness check, our officers ensures whether things are there in order or not in order. So initially we have taken help from assessors also, so that the assessor checks whether the lab has got a separate sample collection area, whether they're able to do sampling properly, and donning area separate, duffing area separate. All these things are there or not there. And then they check whether the visibility is there or not there, whether the assessor can check everything and the transparency is there or not. So these are all the things what we check it during the pre-preparedness. So once the lab is up to the mark, where we tell them, see, these are all the requirements what the lab should be ready, so that the final assessment, when the assessor comes, they are going to check, or they are going to tell you to demonstrate whether the test you are able to do it or not, to check the competency. Yeah, I could see a lot of participants raising hand. After this is being done, we will take up those participants raising hand questions on. So I'll request the participants to be a little bit on hold mode, so that you can make a note of that. So once that activity is being done, so this first day when we take an application form, we do the document review part, and the next day we do I'm telling next day means the second day after submitting the application. So we do try to do the pre-preparedness check. And then the third day, if the lab is all okay and there is absolutely no issues and they will be able to take up the assessment, then the next day, third day, we are doing the assessment with the assessors remotely. There are two assessors where they put them to see and give them the test witness part, whether they're able to do it or not. And then they are recommending, we tell that yes, the laboratory is okay, then we tell the lab is okay. If the lab is not okay, the assessor tells the lab there itself that they are not recommending them. These are all the deficiency what it is there with the lab. And then third situation is that at that particular point of time, what they have seen with the limited sample, it's not okay. So we could categorize by around three particular steps. They are okay, they're not okay, and at that point of time that they are not okay, so that they need to do something or bridge the particular gap, so that they will be able to come up again for the assessment or the process. And the next day, the third day it will go ahead with respect to the accreditation committee. So the case reports, whatever it is being submitted by the lab, it will go to the accreditation committee. The committee reviews the assessment report, and then they provide the recommendations whether they are accredited or not accredited. So maximum it can get spilled over to one more day for an approval process, and otherwise the entire process gets completed in a week's time. Again, it depends on the availability of assessors, readiness of the laboratory, and then how they will be able to demonstrate. In many situations, the assessment starts at even in the evening time, maybe 6 o'clock, and it goes up to maybe 12 o'clock in the midnight or 1 o'clock in the early morning. So these are all the things what it is happening. So as a process is concerned, the application is being submitted, we review that, the document review is being done, and pre-preparedness activity is being done, and after that an assessment remotely is being done. So this is the process. After assessment is remotely being done, based on web-based, the assessor submits the report to NABL, and it goes to the accreditation committee, and then the committee recommends for the accreditation. And once it comes to CEO for approval, then we approve it, and then the accreditation is being given. So the timeline is a week's time only we are taking it for doing it. There are situations where the lab is not ready, the reagents are not there, kits are not there, and there are assessors are not available. Those kind of situation, it is going or spilling it out to maximum of 10 days. Definitely not beyond the 10 days. And also we have made a commitment. If laboratory could not do it at the first time, so we tell them that we don't give you accreditation. And then they go for training and they equip themselves better. And then again, they come back. So we are allowing it as a special case that yes, they can come back. Because as per system that the lab generally makes 1 month time or 3 months time to come back. But this as a special case, we are allowing them to apply after they take corrective actions, they get the training, those particular parts. And then we do the same document review, and then the pre-preparedness check, and then the final assessment. The process is remaining same. The timelines has got reduced, where we are taking a decision. We're not giving a chance or a choice to the laboratory to take a corrective actions and then going ahead. So we are telling that these are all the improvement points which needs to be taken care by the lab. Maybe after some 3 months or 6 months, when the situation becomes okay, we do an on-site assessment. So these are all the things about the process and the timelines what we are following as on. Regarding people is concerned, again, you all know that NABL has got a good team. we made Team A, Team B, Team C sort of things, where Team A, I mean, it's all been led by Ms. Ritu. She's a joint director. The team is headed by Dr. Vandana Jain, director in NABL. And then the Team A is Deputy Director Shweta Sinha, and she's been supported by Tahira and Uday Bhaskar. These are all the Team A, where they take care of already accredited labs, the scope extension part, and they try to convert it so quickly. And there is a Team B, where they are working at the back end, I mean, which is there with Mr. Chandrakant Solanki, and then Joyata and Mitali, where they are at the back end. The assessment report, whatever they get, those things they prepare the case, and then it goes to the accreditation committee. There are separate team for doing a initial application activity, where Gayatri, then Haribabu, Ashok Gogna, these are all the team where they are doing onto that particular system is concerned. So then these things goes to the accreditation committee, where again separately every day the accreditation committees are being planned with the experts, and Devki is taking care of that exclusively. And entire team is, as a teamwork, we are able to do that, so that we are able to complete it within particular time. And all people are very much well committed onto this activity, whatever we are doing it, and all supports are being provided by us. And this is how we are able to, I mean, achieve certain things, what best we'll be able to do. So more than 200 labs. Initially, we started from 17 labs. I mean, now it is already around 240 labs where we have granted accreditation for this RT-PCR RNA virus testing. And still it is going ahead, and the teams are working very hard, and day and night things are happening on. So the main basic need, to summarize, what is that? The need is to have a confidence on what NABL accreditation does, and mainly focusing on the consistency of the results, the correctness of the results, the reliability of the results. That's the main focus, so that the regulators or government have the faith on whatever NABL accredited private laboratories are doing it. And the uniqueness of online assessment is that even though we couldn't travel, the assessors are there at their place, and they could see and then do an assessment remotely. And the timelines of the process remain same: the document adequacy review, then the pre-preparedness check, the final assessment check, and the committee. All these things are still on place, and the timeline we have reduced it within a day of each activity, so that we are able to take from 5 days to maximum 10 days time. There are laboratories, number of laboratories where we have given accreditation in 2 days time and 3 days time also. There are some laboratories where we have given it on 5 days and 10 days time also. So thank you so much for this opportunity and hearing me. I think my time of 10 minutes, what is being given, is also being done. And I think I have taken 5 more minutes extra also. Sorry for that. Thank you so much. I would like to especially thank Dr. Jayalakshmi, Dr. Venkatesh, Thuppil Venkatesh. In fact, he is a mentor for us from the beginning. All things he used to support us, and it's getting continued. I also need to thank Dr. Shankar Singh Gupta, who was behind this particular things, where he wanted that, no, you need to be on board. So I used to tell him that I'm an engineer, I'm not a doctor, medical doctor. So he told, no, you need to tell at least about NABL accreditation system. How is that you started doing this, and how these things are benefiting the country. So thanks to Dr. Shankar Singh Gupta. Thanks to Dr. Ashvini Sen Gupta, because she told that, no, from lab point of view, that I would like to tell, and then we will tell you what exactly we are doing it. So thank you so much. Thanks a lot for everyone for your patience hearing. I now request Dr. Thuppil Venkatesh to take over onto this, whether the second speaker or the question.
Thank you, Dr. Venkateswaran. Very brief, very clear presentation about NABL and role of NABL in this crucial time. And you have covered very well, also provided information. You have answered already one of the questions which is raised by one of our participants. Very well done. Now, questions will be taken up later. I will be moving on to our next speaker, who is representing the assessee from a laboratory, because she got laboratory accredited. Am I right, Dr. Ashvini?
Yes,
You got your laboratory accredited for COVID. Now, lab preparedness, which is something which is very much looked for by many laboratories. Out of over 340 panelists, participants, most of them are probably looking for going into this exercise. I'm sure Dr. Ashwini Sen Gupta will highlight on laboratory preparedness for an online assessment. Here I must tell you, as on March 31st, I think you are all aware, In India, there were only 52 testing labs which were doing COVID testing. But today, as Dr. Venkateswaran has mentioned, NABL itself has given accreditation to 244 labs, of which 217 are already approved by ICMR. That's what I heard from Dr. Venkateswaran this morning.
Yes,
And it's a very good sign. But I must tell you, India ranks very, very low in testing. Very, very low in testing facility. I must mention this. Therefore, our viewers and our panelists are aware of this. Now I hand it over to our Dr. Ashvini Gupta, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that introduction. I must at the outset thank CAHO and NABL to entrust me this responsibility to guide more and more labs to join and start this specialized testing. So I'll be talking mainly about application and preparedness of the laboratory, while Dr. Jayalakshmi will enlighten you regarding the technical requirements. For the application to start, the first thing you have to go, the easiest way is to go onto the NABL homepage, not the page, since in accredited laboratories, if you not on your login page, but on the main homepage, where the existing user can just click on this button, and accredited lab homepage, and then with the existing user button, you can open up the scope of extension. Next, please. Yeah, this is a login apply. Now, this is mainly for those laboratories who are already accredited. So you have to just log in with your own ID and then password, and then you have the scope extension. Next, portal open. The application opens, and then once you click on the view details, you can, there is other way, that is, if you have an active application open and you have not processed that, then in that case you can terminate the application, and then in that case, next, you can select change of application category as scope extension, and then open your application. Once you click onto the view button, you will have the scope extension application open. Then those who are new users. Now for the new users, you have a different button here on the home page where you go for the fresh accreditation, and the web page that will open for you is different from that of the accredited lab, because you are a new user. So you will have the register register apply page for RT-PCR RNA, because you need to generate your own OTP, login ID, password first before you start your application for the scope extension. Once you do that, then you go get the regular. The reason why new user is different from that of regular already accredited laboratory is that they need to be prepared for particular. Next, please. The new user preparedness as compared to that of an accredited laboratory will have to take care of certain things like quality manuals, quality system procedures, including the primary sample collection manual, document control, reference laboratory, the memorandum of understandings with the different reference laboratories, the process of vendor evaluation, then how the laboratory raises non-conformities, takes corrective action, preventive action, and not to mention that they have to do an internal audit. Also, all the quality indicators pertaining to molecular testing will also be checked, and risk assessment too. Now, and management review meeting records will also be checked by the assessor. Now, this is in along with the technical aspects which Dr. Jayalakshmi will be taking in details. Reason why I am enumerating this here is that an accredited laboratory is already aware of all this, and they should be already prepared with all this. A new laboratory needs to prepare it along with the preparedness for the molecular testing facility and infrastructure as well as the okay. Then once you have opened the application, the first thing you enter is the laboratory details, after which next will be the discipline details, which is their molecular testing, which is already pre-selected for the laboratory. But the most important is the scope of accreditation. That is, here there is a scroll list for the specific test. Like Mr. Venkateswaran has already enumerated that as per ICMR guidelines, all the private laboratories who want to go for COVID testing will have to select a test which is an RNA virus other than COVID. They cannot directly apply for COVID-19 testing. They have to have, so there is a scroll list available here like HCV, HIV, H1N1, which they can select, and the corresponding type of sample which they will have to select, whether it is by TrueNat, cartridge based, or RT-PCR. This is the same methodology which is already selected over here for them. And but mind you, unless the scope is selected, no further technical data can be entered until the scope is rightfully selected. Now, another thing that the lab has to prepare itself. Now, this is new because labs are not yet used to online audits. I have to see to it that all these facilities, they have to have either a desktop or a laptop with audiovisual facility. Our regular lab desktops usually do not have audiovisual facility. So they might have to be made ready. A network connection of more than 2 Mbps speed so that the online audit goes very smooth and there are no hitches. Video conferencing facilities, whichever service provided you select, has to be there, but the facility might have to be bought so that the time, audit time, can be actually from 3 to 6 hours. Just today morning, Dr. Jayalakshmi was saying that she was auditing like till 2:30 in the night. So, I mean, that sometimes some technical hitches do occur. So the lab should be prepared for the extended time limits. At least 4 to 5 devices apart from the laptop, main laptop, which should be ready with the screen share and conduction of the audit. So it can be the host, which will also have the scanned documents ready in place for screen share and to show the assessors as and when the assessor requires. And the assessors also require the documents to be shared with them, to be sent to them, and NABL. So ready access to the mail. So as soon as they ask, the documents have to be mailed to them. And apart from that, 4 to 5 devices should be ready so that one device is dedicated at the testing facility so that throughout they can see the testing facility for the entire cycle of the run, and also 3 or 4 to show your other facilities like the primary sample collection, your infrastructure of the facility of the molecular testing lab, and other. Also, like Mr. Venkateswaran said, donning of the PP, all these might also be checked. So the lab should be able to show this preparedness by having different devices. Mostly mobiles can help with its audiovisual facility, can assess for the assessors to show the facility. Then after that, the organization details have to be filled, like the legal identity, parent organization. As we, for accredited laboratories, they're already used to that. For a new lab, this has to be mandatory. Management personnel from lab director, quality manager. Also, apart from technical staff of the molecular section, the support staff like phlebotomist, transcriptionist, front desk staff will also be audited during the online audit. And not to forget the authorized signatory with a backup signatory wherever mostly required, and these will be audited. Now the HR files of most of these personals will be asked by the assessors and be looked into. So these will can be scanned and kept ready mainly on the laptop or the host laptop or desktop, where they can be easily shared or can be shown by the mobile. But last but not the least, trained personnel. The personnel which are there for RT-PCR, whether they're technical or the authorized signatory, should be trained in RT-PCR. So the training will have to be shown to the assessors. So to sum it up, RT-PCR virus other than COVID-19 should be there. A new lab. Reason why a new lab is slightly different from an accredited one is because the establishment of the quality management system will also be assessed along with the technical requirements of the molecular section. Adequate documentation should be there. Mainly, if these documents are scanned and kept ready, it reduces the time and the technical problems. Adequate preparedness for conducting online assessment, like I've already enumerated. If the lab is prepared, then it reduces the time. SOPs, if all the SOPs that are necessary, including primary sample collection manual, biomedical waste manual also, and internal audit, quality indicators, management review meetings. These are all will be looked into by the assessors. So I'll be signing off by saying again, to combat corona, we can not emphasize more on keeping the environment clean. So reduce, recycle, reuse. That's my mantra for you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ashvini, for a very clear narration of how simple it is to apply and go through the accreditation process. I think you have removed the fear amongst many delegates who are looking forward to see how comfortable as an assessee when they are dealing with accreditation body and assessors. You have made it very well. When the questions come, we will forward that question to you. You'll be able to answer. Now, I'll be requesting Dr. Jayalakshmi. Dr. Jayalakshmi will be talking on online assessment for molecular testing as an assessor. Now, you heard what an assessee feels. And now what assessor feels about the process of accreditation will be from Dr. Jayalakshmi, who herself is an assessor. Yes, Dr. Jayalakshmi.
Thank you very much, sir. First of all, I'd like to thank CAHO and NABL for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on this online assessment mode, which is a huge learning opportunity for all of us together in this. So what does need to be assessed in this entire online assessment mode? First of all, like what Dr. Ashvini was telling, we are going to see all of these from a remote setting in an online format, and you're as if you're doing it on site itself. But there are two things which are the focus. One is the quality of performance of the test in the scope, whichever the lab has chosen, or it may not be just one test, there can be more than one test also. But the safety of the personnel performing the test is also important. Well, for all of these, there need to be a documentation and implementation of the same, and that will be evidenced just like any other on-site assessment in an online format. Now, how do you assess? The pillar is the ISO 15189:2012 and the NABL 112 criteria. At all times, these are the reference. Even if it is a single test in the scope, we would be looking at the molecular testing based on these two only. Now, molecular assessment can be done for any of these assessment methods, or molecular testing methods. So the lab may be wanting to go for a real-time PCR by a routine open RT-PCR method, or a cartridge-based, a gene expert, or a chip-based TrueNAT, or a film array-based BioFire, or others. But most of these need to be approved by ICMR. Even if it is an emergency use approval, EUA, it should need to be approved. Sometimes you might have a quantitative assay. You may not be doing a quantitative for a SARS-CoV-2, but however, your initial assessment may be a quantitative assay. But what, as an assessor, we would be looking at is looking at it as a quantitative assay by molecular testing only, and all parameters would be looked at into that. So where is the focus? As a technical assessor, we're looking at two things. One, I would like to see the entire test witnessed. When I say entire, which means from the time the sample is collected, the sample is packed, transported, received at the laboratory, it is processed, the test is undergone, and then there is a reliable result, whatever result is there, and then there is an interpretation of a test based on that, and a release of the report. So this entire thing would be witnessed for a sample, which means we would be looking at a sample collection at site in this mode. Also, we will be looking at a reproducibility of a test report, which means a previously tested sample in the laboratory on the test, on the equipments by same test methodology will be looked at for reproducibility on the day of assessment, just live in front of us. So we would be looking at both of these, witnessing the entire process as well as looking for the reproducibility of the test report and see whether they are comparable. Now you look at just like any other assessment, like what Ashvini was mentioning, we would be looking at as any other assessment, we would look at as a technical requirement, whether you have competent staff working and performing these tests, whether they've been trained to all this. So you need to look at the authorized signatory, the technical staff, the quality managers, their certificate, their job description, which is acceptable by both of them, okay, and training records, which means they have a training plan, and then there is an assessment, competency assessment done, and immunization, which includes for hepatitis B and looking for the evidence of these protectivity by looking for anti-HBs antibody titers, as well as for looking at the vaccination against influenza for those going in for SARS-CoV-2. The second one is trying to look for the accommodation or the infrastructure. The most important, because this molecular test, which is very sensitive, requires a unidirectional workflow. So though you divide them into a PCR area 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay, some labs we would really require them to have 4 areas. The PCR area 1 is the pre-PCR area where you will have the sample collected or received and extraction is happening. The PCR area 2 is where your master mix is getting prepared, and the next area would where the reagent is getting mixed up or your template addition is happening with the master mix. And the fourth area is where the amplification is happening. And you would always want to flow through this entire process from extraction to master mix preparation to addition and then amplification, and never crisscross or come back. Not the material, not the personnel who are performing the test at that point of time as well. So this is very, very important, and this will be definitely looked at as we go through a lab tour. I mean, with the devices, of course. So the lab personnel will hold a device and take us through the entire of the lab to see the orientation of the lab and the direction of this lab. This is just a little bit of engineering control, which may help for people who are going in for the lab for the first time. So whenever you're designing the lab, please remember there are few areas where you need to have a negative pressure and few areas where you could have a positive pressure. Positive pressures are those clean areas, and those which are a little bit dirty or which is receiving the samples would need to have a negative area. So your negative area is when you have your nucleic acid extraction area, and your PCR and your master mix area usually is the positive pressure area. Need to have a designated area for donning and doffing, which means the person wears a personal protective depending on the test in the scope, and then performs the sample collection or extraction process as it may be, and then they come out of that area and then doff. So this should happen in 2 different areas. And mind you, the doffing is more important than donning itself, because the doffing requires more carefulness, because the external surfaces are all contaminated now. So you cannot be doing in the same area. And it is also important the personnel shouldn't be wearing the personal protective and walking around the entire of the area. So this will be looked at. The equipments, we look at the calibration, but if it's a newer equipment for which it's been which is there, then you look for the IQ, OQ, and PQ. Okay, the installation, operational, and performance qualification of these equipments will be looked at. So when you look at these calibrations, there are a few things to be kept in mind, which is it has to maintain that periodicity of its calibration if it's an older equipment, and it has to be calibrated the person by an authorized person who's been certified to calibrate. And it has to be calibrated for the performance that it requires. For example, if it's an autoclave which requires the pressure and the temperature to be monitored, both these parameters need to be calibrated. If it is a freezer which need to be maintaining at -80 degrees centigrade, then the calibration should have covered -80 along with the other lower temperatures that it would hold. So this is important. And this has to be taken into consideration as all time. Lot-to-lot verification need to be done if the lab has been performing the test for a long period of time. So when there is a new lot that they receive, then they have to subject to a challenge of test by the old lot versus the new lot with the controls and the reagents with the known positive and negative samples, and see whether it is performing well. And this has to be documented. And only when it is approved and it is okay, then it can be allowed for use. Similar need to be done even for a lot acceptance, which means for a first time that you take, you need to know whether it is working well. So you have to challenge it for the control and then see whether it is working. The known positive and negative controls need to be got and then checked for, and also use the kit controls. So this is trying to look at the test request form. Okay, the test request form, this I'm just sharing with you the ICMR form, the SRF, which is the version 11. This is for the SARS-CoV-2, which is a standardized form which is available to all of them. And so this is how they would receive, but need to look at all the parameters that is required for the test request form to be present in a test request form for us to see. And that is important, which means sample collection, the receive time, this type of sample, the test requested, person who's asked for, the sample ID, all of these details need to be there. You could look at the ISO 15189 document for the details. And what is visualized is the sample collection process, the entire process itself, and the packaging of these samples. If it's the SARS-CoV-2, or for any of these respiratory samples, you will have to follow the currently recommended guidelines by the ICMR as well as the NCDCs. And packing need to be done as recommended, and transportation safely by the personnel wearing the personal protectors to the area where they are supposed to receive. And this should be directive by the primary sample collection procedural manual, which would describe in detail how the sample need to be collected. Sometimes you have to use two different types of a swab, as shown in this picture, to collect two different sites, which is a nasopharyngeal as well as the oropharyngeal, if you're looking for testing H1N1 or SARS-CoV-2, and put them in the same VTM. So you have to follow those guidelines very, very carefully and pack them by placing an absorbent material, then pack them into 3 layers. All of these are required. Also, the person who's collecting the sample need to be trained prior for the sample collection process itself, and they should know what are the sample rejection criteria, and that is defined and known to all, and it is available for them. You need to have the standard operating procedure or the SOPs for the technical SOPs and work test instruction placed on sites for people to work. And this could be taken from the kit inserts, okay, because sometimes you may be using more than one kit for the performance of the test. So there may be some things which are common, and there may be some things which are very unique. Each test has a different methodology of process or going around with the test itself. And sometimes you will have to use 2 different tubes, or sometimes it's a single tube. The CT values are different for each of them. The probes will be different. Therefore, you have to write down exactly what the manufacturer says. And this is going to be very specific for the kit as well as the equipment that is being used for testing itself. There should be some written down guidelines for the procedure of the retention itself. So you have to post-testing, where are you going to store them? How are you going to store them? Are you going to aliquot them? Is it going to be at -20 or -70? How long will you keep it if it is going to be in the refrigeration? All of these need to be written down. And if you're going to discard the sample after tested and beyond its period, you need to identify how you would discard it, and that needs to be written down in the SOP manual as well. And this material which is going to be discarded has to be decontaminated by autoclaving as a process if it's a plastic with the contaminated material as defined in the laboratory, and it should go through the process as defined in the guidelines of the Biomedical Waste Rule 2016. And the biomedical waste in general also have to be segregated and disposed as per the regulations of the country, by the Biomedical Waste Rule 2016. When the test is performed, we will be witnessing the entire test process. In fact, we will also look at how they clean the area before they start the work, and how are they pipetting, and what is the activity that they are doing there, where are they storing, where are their equipments placed, is there the sample and the reagent getting mixed at any point of time? Okay, so all of these would be looked at. So you have to bear in mind that at no point you will mix the sample and the reagent, and so that you prevent cross-contamination at all times. And once a test is performed and test is done, we will be looking at the the competency of the authorized signatory in validating the test report and see whether it is a valid report. And if there would not be, or there is an issue, they should know how to troubleshoot. So both of these would be assessed by us as a team of me and the lead assessor in the team. So we would look at the graphs and all that, with the scores and the values and the CT would be looked at. The 5.6 looks at the quality control, the IQC plan, and the performance itself for each of the tests, depending on whether it's an RT-PCR by the open method, or if it's a cartridge or chip-based, or the BioFire. All of these have different methodologies, but however, quality control is the crucial one, because your everyday test report is dependent on everyday's pass of these QC. So with confidence, you can say that these tests are okay. And capturing them over a period of time, you will be able to say the performance of this particular test in the laboratory itself. So you can do a trend analysis. So this is important, and that has to be captured. And this documentation is a key, and that will be looked at. So we will look at the plan as well as the performance, and also the raw data that is available. We look at the PT, the ILC, which means the interlab comparison, as well as the EQA that would be there. For the tests that do not have an EQA that is available, so you will have to do any other method, which would be, exchanging your samples with another laboratory, which is an NABL accredited one, and see whether they are okay. And then you also would look at whether split sampling can be done, or repetitive sampling or testing can be done. So these are various other methods that can be followed to see whether they are functioning well. So evaluation of these results also is important to see whether it is acceptable. For example, if it's a quantitative assay, you will have standards, and these standards will be for different levels, and you will see whether they are okay, and they would come as logarithmic values or log values. And this log value, you would see what is the acceptability, and that has to be defined, and see whether they are accepted also at this particular point of time in the test. The 5.7 is trying to look at the retention of this sample. So the post-test sample, if it's an RNA sample, the nucleic acid need to be preserved at minus 70 to 80 degrees centigrade in the deep freezers. And this has to be aliquoted and placed, and it should be easily retrievable at any point. So there should be a traceability of these samples, and that is also that will going to be looked at. These are for the post-testing, your disposal of biomedical waste. And for those labs which are going to do COVID testing in the future, you also need to identify where you will put these waste with COVID labels on them, COVID-19 waste only labels on them, which would be in the sample collection area and the extraction area. So these two areas will definitely have the infectious material which will be discarded for a respiratory sample. For a blood sample, this may not be applicable though. The 5.89 would look at the test report itself. So there is a list of test attributes that you look at to release a report, and you will also look at the report content, including the interpretation of a test report, because ultimately it is a clinician who's benefited at the other end along with the patient for their management. Therefore, the interpretation of the report, because sometimes the interpretation what is given in this test report is what as given in a kit for our understanding as a technical person, but not for a clinician. So that has to be taken in mind, and then you write that in your or put it down in your reports there. And if there is a critical value that is identified, you should have a methodology of conveying this critical values to the clinician or the person who's asked for this particular test, and that is relevant and that is documented as well. So there should be a process for automated release of selection and release of reports. And whenever there is an accidental error of reporting, what is the process of amending these test reports? All of these would come in 5.8 and 5.9 as a test report. The last one is 5.10, which is validation of the LIS itself. So you might have the laboratory information system, but you may be trusting them very well, but you have to see whether it is working very well, and you have to verify them. There are two things that you would do. One is a validation, which is done by the vendor at least once a year, then a verification, which is done periodically by the lab to see whether what you are entering is what you are getting at the other end, because you're going to collate all of these data and they are going to make a decision out of this. These are the managerial requirements. I think Dr. Ashvini has already covered. Just looking at them, MOUs apart from this with your biomedical waste, the common treatment facility, the third-party MOUs also included. Your referral lab selection, vendor evaluation, quality indicator, risk assessment, everyday NCs. What is that you would be doing for that? What is the root cause analysis, corrective, preventive that you would do? and your internal audit, that is in an assigned period of time by a person designated to do that for this particular lab, and what is the action taken, and what is the management review meeting agenda and the minutes of these meetings. So all of these will be looked at. Now, after you do all this is not, though we took time to tell you these details, it is not so difficult at all. We have done it at our labs, and it is, for a first timer, you may be a little bit apprehensive, but it is not at all difficult. And people are there to help you out from the NABL end on, in helping you prepare yourself, your labs for the audit itself. So they tell you exactly what you should do and how you should do. In fact, they give you a trial run to see the entire process, just a snapshot before the main picture, as you would say. So with all of that, and if you have a good team that works together in your lab, it is so easy for you to pick up this trophy of NABL and have this, coveted logo on your test facility in your laboratory. As of 5th June, I think this has already been mentioned by Sir, both the sirs, both the Venkatesh sirs. It is 259 as of today that many labs been accredited. And I would also take the time to appreciate the efforts taken by NABL team working at their end in bringing out this novel methodology of accreditation itself, which is an online format of assessment done remotely. We sitting at our facilities and looking and seeing through the lenses and hearing through the audio devices, that you exactly do what you would do on an on-site without any difference in the entire process. So the process remains the same. The methodology will also be the same. Only the mode that is done is slightly different. And this has been coordinated very, very well by the entire of the NABL team, all of them, like what Mr. Venkatesh sir had told. The entire team works. I always tell them, see, for me, I work at my hospital in the morning and I come back to do this assessment whenever I'm assigned to. But for you guys, it's 24/7 NABL, and they are continuously working. They're addressing issues from the SSE end as well as from the assessors, and anybody would have any queries, they are there. And sometimes they're handling multiple things, and they are in and out of assessments as observers. So hats off to the entire team for the brilliant job that they are doing and continuing to do, just to add more quality labs performing COVID tests into our country, so that more people are benefited by this testing process itself. So the take home from my side as a technical assessor for NABL would be two things only. Performance of the test is the key. So remember, we would be looking at the test witness, as well as the reproducibility. However, everything else would depend. Okay, will fall into this. If any of them would fall a little short, you will have problem in the performance itself. So performance is the key, and also the safety is a concern. So we will be looking at how well this safety measures are being taken, and how people are donning and doffing, washing hands and moving material, preventing cross contamination, etc., etc. So all of these, just not the personal safety, also the material safety. All right. So, like Sir Dr. Venkatesh Thuppil sir said, I think we are, as the lab has also been part and working more than ever for fighting this corona as warriors. And this is my little part to do a bit for the country. And I'm very, very happy to be part of this entire exercise, because every time I do an assessment, it's a huge learning for me personally, and very, very happy. Thanks, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. So you do your little bit of good where you are, and it is these little bits of good put all together that overwhelm the world. So we are doing our little bit for the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jayalakshmi, for taking everybody through the process of what to do and how to do, and what are the assessment requirements. You have very beautifully narrated that assessors are not there for finding fault. They are there to look for the fact. Based on the fact, the assessment, as per the assessment requirements, you are focusing, beautifully focused, and made it so simple. I'm sure all our delegates of today's wonderful 1 hour session are really benefited by Dr. Jayalakshmi's beautiful presentation. Many of them are asking for your presentation and Ashwini's presentation. I'm sure it will be made available to them. Now, when you were showing the last slide that we should go one step further to protect our country, protect our people, and fight the COVID, I tell you, as on today, as on June 5th, we have identified very small number of cases. Why is this? Is it because of non-availability of test facilities at many places? Or why is this? Only 688 testing facilities are there for 1.3 billion population in India, compared to almost, how many tests we have done. It's only something like 3,100 tests per million. In spite of so much of effort our NABL has put in and accredited laboratories are doing, we have done only 3,100 tests per million, compared to in US, about which we have been talking about. They have done more than 60,000 tests per million. Look at the facilities provided in developed country and where we are. I think listening to you, Dr. Jayalakshmi, I'm sure many more laboratories will come forward, get accredited, will do tests, will come out with the real scenario of our country, which will take us to a step further to fight this COVID. Okay. Anyway, it's an excellent presentation. Now we have an open forum. I invite all our delegate participants. Already I have noted down some questions. Some of them, almost 25 questions are there, and many have raised their hands. There are 327 participants as on now, and now it's open forum. Questions, including questions from the participants, are allowed now. Please go ahead. The timeline for accreditation. Somebody wanted to know. This question is already answered by Dr. Venkateswaran. And maybe you would like to summarize timeline required for accreditation. COVID, I mean it's for COVID testing. Venkat.
Actually, what is that I was telling that it's a week's time is what we are taking it. Again, it is depending on the laboratory's readiness as well as the availability of assessors. But definitely it is not getting delayed too much.
Okay.
I would also like to say a comment on this is that I think there is more time is required for the lab to get ready than for the actual assessment process, because they have to be ready with everything. Only then they can go for this assessment process. If everything is ready, the assessment process actually goes very smooth.
Yes, I agree with you. One of the participants is asking, this is to both Ashvini as well as Jayalakshmi. What is interlab comparison? You know, very straightforward question they're asking. Though Dr. Jayalakshmi has taken us through ISO 15189 5.1 to 5.10 stepwise. She has also mentioned under 5.6, ensuring the quality of examination results. And would you like to please summarize this question from one of our delegates?
I think Jayalakshmi, would you like to take this?
This is what is interlab comparison. I think the person is little get confused. Interlab comparison is little different from exchanging sample with another lab. Interlab comparison is a program offered by some bodies which are accredited as per 17024. Here the person is probably asking for exchange of sample with another laboratory.
Yes,
Dr.
Yes, because inter-laboratory comparison, I think, encompasses both ECAS and ILC. But majority of the parameters, I think ECAS is not available. So it is exchange of samples with other laboratories, other NABL accredited laboratories. That is the main way, where I think Dr. Jayalakshmi has already explained that whether it is qualitative or quantitative, the interlab comparison has to be done by exchange of samples. And after the results are available, they have to be assessed and evaluated to see whether the results are acceptable or not by log calculation. Would you like to expand on that, Jayalakshmi?
That's it. I guess that's it. So for an ILC, it would be the lab. You receive the sample and then perform a test as if you're doing it as a routine test, and then you give your sample and see, and you look at your performance, and you look at the comparison by itself. It's just not positive and negative when it is a quantitative assay. You are trying to look at the log, and when you look at the logs, then you will see what is acceptable, and this is predefined, and it is like I told you, this has to be written down. You have to have an SOP for your quality, and then you've written down. So this is what I would accept whenever there is a testing that is done like this. Yeah. Is it okay, sir? Is that answering?
It's fine. Wherever for certain tests, interlab comparison is officially or formal interlab comparison is not available. ISO 15189 under 5.6.3 very clearly says any of the 5 following methods can be adopted. Under that, there's exchange of sample with another laboratory. Please keep this in mind. It is simple. It is not difficult. How many labs, how many number of times, what is the frequency has to be defined by the quality system itself, management system itself. The next question, can private lab apply for COVID-19 is the question. I think our NABL has so far given accreditation to all private labs only. They can apply, isn't it? I will forward this question to Venkateswaran.
Private labs as well as government labs, we are giving accreditation to all. But for private labs, the ICMR has made it mandatory so that they need to take NABL accreditation. And we are giving accreditation for RT-PCR, RNA virus testing. We're not giving it for COVID because after approval from ICMR only, the lab will be allowed to do COVID testing.
Yes. You see, for the next question, in fact, both Dr. Ashvini and Dr. Jayalakshmi have already elaborated an answer. This question is a very straightforward. What is the training required? Now, the person who has asked this, I don't know the name, is asking a particular, with special reference to the COVID testing, or whether they are asking for general testing under 5.1 under personnel, 5.1 subclass. You have training. And you also elaborated through your slides various kinds of training requirement, training in ethics, training in technical details, training in disposal, training in so many things. Ashvini also has narrated this. I think this question is already answered. Anything you would like to add, Dr. Ashvini, on this training?
Apart from the already accredited laboratories already have a training protocol, plan, process in place. For new laboratories, if once they're applying first time, they may have to look into this aspect, that training regarding everything else, right from primary sample collection, whatever parameter they have selected, right from primary sample collection of that particular parameter to testing, that is RT-PCR, proficiency in the testing of RT-PCR training will also be looked into by the assessor for the technical as well as the backup authorized signatories.
In fact, they need to have a training in the equipment that they are going to perform.
Yes.
So they have to be trained in the equipment that they are going to perform, and that has to be assessed also by looking for their competencies as well.
I hope the person who has asked this question has got the answer. And Yogista V. Kinney has asked for PowerPoints to be shared, and also what are the certificates to be made ready, kept ready? Dr. Kalyani has asked. As an assessor, Dr. Jayalakshmi, would you like to comment on this? What are all the certificates you are going to look for?
When we are looking at certificates, I think they're trying to see whether the documents as such. So it would be the legal document itself, and then the biomedical waste, your permission from the Pollution Control Board, and then your MOU with the third party for a common treatment facility, the MOU with the other laboratories that you have tied up with, and then for the equipment, if they are asking about the certificates for these equipments, etc. So for each of these equipment, depending on the type of equipment, they will require the IQ, OQ, PQ, which is a calibration itself. an OTV which is required for your devices on performing this amplification test, or thermocycler would require. And then for the autoclave specific to the equipment itself, for the pressure and the temperature, for the pipettes, for the biosafety cabinet. In fact, the biosafety cabinet, in fact, I forgot to tell you this biosafety cabinet, the minimum requirement is a level 2A, and this one has to have a ducting. So many of the laboratories just have this facility of a biosafety cabinet. Maybe the levels are okay, either 2A or 2B is available, but the ducting is not done. For a 2B, it may not matter much, but for 2A, it does, because there is a recirculation and this air needs to be vented out. And that ducting is a must. And this is given as an option by the person who's going to place it for you. So it is important that you check for that. And for your centrifuges, your vortex, your pipettes, everything you need to have calibration in the defined period of time, depending on when it was done last.
I think the question mainly they are asking is for certificates, that is certificates as to who is qualified to be the authorized signatory and what training certificates. I think that is the question that they want to ask. So I think in this case will be who is qualified, definitely a microbiologist, but microbiologist who's trained in molecular testing. Just a microbiologist without training may not be the one who will be able to give. And the technical staff, of course, should be able to show training in molecular testing, RT-PCR. And apart from things, of course, qualification certificates will be looked into by the assessors.
Thank you, Dr. Ashvini. There are more than 64 questions. We may not be able to take up all of them. Some of them I'm picking up. Dr. Rajendra Kumar is asking, what are the specifications for different areas, size-wise, dimension-wise? The quality should not be compromised. That's what I feel. The size is not the thing. The quality of the end result should not be compromised. Now, I'm sure our assessor as well as the assessee will agree with me. If you go to different labs, they have different sizes, space. But load and automation and many things matter here. And Dr. Shankar Gupta has asked, in fact, he played a very key role in organizing this meeting, to Dr. Jayalakshmi. Is number of BS2 cabinet requirement in Gene Expert and TrueNet less than RT-PCR lab is a question?
No, the biosafety cabinet requirement is the same for a Gene Expert, particularly like any other RT-PCR, because they're going to open the sample in the biosafety cabinet itself. But however, for a TrueNet, okay, the sample is collected in a lysis buffer. So it's slightly a little better, but always it is not compromised. You still need to have a biosafety cabinet. The levels remain the same. Only thing is maybe a room lesser than what is required, because you just have to add the sample in here, and your processing next level is in the equipment, your Gene Expert itself or CBNAT itself. So which is in a different. So your room numbers may reduce by 1, but however your biosafety levels will remain the same, because your risk for infection is the same.
Thank you, Dr. Jayalakshmi. I think this question is to our CEO NABL. Is NABL accreditation for COVID-19 testing applicable for government testing centers? Or is it only for private labs? Is a question asked by some anonymous person.
Actually, I told that before itself. NABL is voluntary accreditation, and it is applicable for both government as well as for private labs.
Okay, and I would like to add something here. In the government, there are full-time qualified employees always appointed. And there's a system in place for selecting equipment and also managing. Since these are assured, ICMR has given that lineage that government laboratories, even though they are not NABL accredited, if they are approved by ICMR, they can go ahead and do the COVID testing. Isn't it, Dr. Venkateswaran? Okay. Now coming to Abhishek Mitra. What evidence of training in RT-PCR? I think Dr. Jayalakshmi, as an assessor, what is that you would like to see? It was already answered. You said in one of the government establishment they should go and undergo training, and so training certificate is what is the evidence.
Yeah.
If I
recall. Yeah. I think Dr. Ashvini also added to it last. I think they need to have a certificate saying that they are trained on the equipment that they are going to perform the test. And if they have additional training on molecular and they have a knowledge and they have done some studies on these, that would be added. However, they need to have training on the equipment that they are going to perform the test itself. And they need to have this understanding. They need to have this training given by the person who gives the equipment itself, or an expert. They could have later an in-house training by people within the facility who can train them on the processing itself. So all of these are additional, but for the equipment, they need to have a training.
Thank you. Many people have asked the same question about the waste disposal procedure. I think there is a good number of instructions from ICMR, WHO, Pollution Control Board, which if they comply with that, I think this question is answered, isn't it?
Yes.
Is it a separate session one of you can take for our through our CAHO on waste disposal, especially with COVID? And how long molecular biology lab should function before applying for NABL is the question, Venkat. From Pratap, Manik Nandan.
What was the question, sir?
For how long molecular biology lab should function before applying for NABL?
No, but for this emergency situations, we haven't defined that. But otherwise, ideally, a lab should at least function for a month or so. Because this is an emergency situation where they are having a new setup. They have did some experiences there for the lab. At least you need to do some testing. Otherwise, you will not have an experience of demonstrating it to the assessment team.
Yes, thank you.
So there is nothing defined exactly on that.
And if laboratory already had infrastructure for RNA PCR testing, does laboratory need separate facility for COVID testing? This is another question. Jayalakshmi, as a microbiologist, will answer this.
For this particular question, it depends on what type of an RNA testing was done earlier and what is now there that they're going to do. However, the sample collection becomes more important here because of the contagiousness of the organism. So the carefulness that they need to follow while collecting the sample. So identified area for sample collection itself, either in the way of a kiosk or having a different methodology, but wearing a appropriate PPE, trained person performing the test and collecting the sample, all of these become important. And having them in a defined area and the route is important. So that would be
something you should all listen now, you know. Manjula Ramakrishna and Jatindra Bhatia, both of them have said, excellent presentation, good presentation. Ashvini and Jayalakshmi, congratulations to you. Anyway, we'll move on to another question. Many of them are asking for the mail ID, you know. And Jitendra Bhatia, thank you very much for your kind comments. Then Jaideep Nath, a new lab can apply for scopes in other departments like hematology, biochemistry, clinical pathology, along with RT-PCR is the question. Venkat?
No, presently, since because of this lockdown, we are concentrating more only on this.
Okay.
Rest of the things we are taking it, but once the lockdown gets over, then we will be able to do an on-site assessment. See, these things are all only a temporary arrangement on remotely. But otherwise, we'll have to be back to our normal activity or process of assessment is concerned.
Many questions are common. How many labs are required? And please provide EQUAS provider list. I think Dr. Jayalakshmi, whatever information you have, we can pass it on about the. I think Randox has started providing.
Randox has come up with and is starting to provide, and at a price and with the agreement, they could definitely partner with to get the material. So that definitely there. But there are other means. When there is no EQUAS, there are other means like what we listed earlier. They could still do that.
In fact, we would have loved to answer live to many of the answers are live only. Now, how to conduct trend analysis and risk management, kit validation. These are all separate training program. You can contact experts and they will definitely help you. And each one is 1 or 2 day session. For risk management and trend analysis and things like that. There is Sadia Shahnaz has asked, Sukumar Ratnam Giri, is there any specific area requirement for the lab and each area? Yes, I think separate area is required when there is a, isn't it, Dr. Jayalakshmi? They cannot be doing, you have very clearly showed the diagram.
So
and
they have to have activities in defined areas only. So when they enter, there should be a sample reception area and then extraction, Then there is an area for master mix preparation itself. Then addition of the template with the master mix, and then your amplification. So these are all defined areas which are well separated from each other. Like I also mentioned, it is preferable to have the appropriate negative or positive pressures depending on the type area. And the personal protectors that you wear in the extraction area should never go to the next area. Even the stationaries and the pipettes have to be dedicated for each of these areas. This is to prevent cross contamination, and you should not be storing materials in the master mix area, samples in the master mix area. Sometimes you see a refrigerator with the samples being collected and placed there because they find that's an area, that's a place that they found some space for the refrigerator. But that cannot be done because this would contaminate the environment and definitely would lead to a lot of false positivity. This is a very, very sensitive test, so they have to be very, very careful about processing of the sample also. So dedicated area is a must, and unidirectional flow is a must. Maintaining the engineering controls is equally important. Infection control practices appropriately followed at all times is again a must.
Dr. Deepti and many others have asked what is the ideal report format. I think ISO 15189 report contents, if they comply with, I think this question is answered.
Yes,
If they look at the standard itself is a good guideline for that, isn't it, Dr. Jayalakshmi?
Yes,
you have also shown, you have also described that.
I just put it as report attributes. They could look at the ISO 15189 standards and look at what is required in them, and if they would just fill them, that's really enough. Yeah.
Dr. Ashvini has answered this next question by anonymous attendee. Quality indicators. You have already mentioned about several key performance indicators in COVID testing is an essential thing. Kit verification, you have shown lot-to-lot verification already, Dr. Jayalakshmi. That is also answered. And many questions are overlap. Same questions are asked by many people. And do microbiologists, technicians need separate training? Yes, separate training. Training is a continuous process. This is a new test, new addition. This training is also required. They have to have a training, and after training, competence evaluation. For MCI approved medical college, is ICMR approval required? Is a very pertinent question asked by Sukumar Ratnamgiri.
Yes.
Yes,
I think
answer is yes.
Venkatesh will answer that. Yes, I think
yes. Some other interesting question we can take up. We are NABL accredited lab. In fact, I would like to make a correction here. No lab is NABL accredited. NABL gives accreditation to test methodology in that lab. Labs cannot claim that we are NABL accredited. If they claim, they may be doing many tests which are not accredited. Okay. Therefore, we should educate our people saying it is not, NABL is not giving accreditation to laboratory, not even to the department, but to test methodology, whether calibration or testing in various disciplines. NABL gives accreditation to test methodology, which is in the scope of the laboratory, which has applied for accreditation. And he says that Diya Shankar, I'm sure Diya Shankari is now clear about what is accreditation, and would like to introduce RT PCR testing in another associated facility that is not accredited. I think good question. Many situations were there earlier also. Site A is accredited for some tests. Site B is not accredited. How to go about? I think Venkat, you would like to answer this question.
In particular, what was exactly?
This is they have. Some of the tests are accredited at one site. They have another associated facility.
Yeah, they can add.
That is not accredited.
They can add that location.
They can add. Oh, okay.
There is a provision in the application form itself that location 1, location 2, like that they can add. Even if they're already accredited, now they can go for the fresh application and then include for applications. Change in CAB operations is the tab where it is.
Thank you. Very clear. In fact, what are the immunization details required? This is their experts in their department will be able to guide them. Their microbiologist or infection control officer can be, they can take their help. Would you like to add something to this, Dr. Jayalakshmi, anonymous?
Sir, I think I did mention they required, for sure, all of them need to be vaccinated for hepatitis B, and evidence of protectivity by looking at anti-HBs titers, which is also documented. And for those who are going in for the SARS-CoV-2, it is a good practice to be vaccinated for influenza as well. So all of those who are performing tests in these laboratories need to be vaccinated for influenza. So I just want to add one more. There are a lot of queries asking why you are asking us to why HCV test and then you allow for SARS-CoV-2. Just wanted to say that the RNA viruses are definitely difficult to handle in a molecular testing facility, and the process is very different compared to a DNA virus. So RNA viruses are taken as surrogate only. So your test performance based on the performance of the test that we witness in the laboratories at all points, from the time it is collected to the time it is stored, retrieved back, reproduced, etc. We look at the stability of this entire system itself in performing the test. So if any of them failed, they would not be able to reproduce the test. And these requires centrifuging for certain of the tests as per the kit instruction in cold. In lesser temperatures to be centrifuged. So that is why even in the list of requirements, you will see a refrigerated centrifuge being there. So your handling itself is very, very different. So look at your preparedness of your laboratory for handling COVID in the future. So even when we are assessing your laboratory for a HCV test, which is based on a plasma sample as EDTA blood or plasma as a sample, we would still want to see whether you are prepared enough for a COVID testing if you are approved later for the test also. So that is also looked into.
There are a lot of technical questions asked. One of them is, can I add the template in the extraction area under negative pressure?
Yes, you can. You can. This is a technical question, of course. So you can add in case you do not have, but you should have a policy of cleaning the entire facility. You should have a very structured decontamination program in place before that activity and this activity. An activity of extraction to an activity of adding the template to the master mix. This has to be, between these two, they should have a stringent decontamination process, and all that you have to write down and follow to the T before you do this. So then it is allowed, but it is preferred to have a different area.
See, one person, Pushpalata Manjunath has asked, do we need to autoclave disposable PPE? Mask, for example. In fact, I would like to ask my question, should I put it in the pressure cooker, my mask every day? Now, more masks are used outside the lab than in the lab, isn't it? Now, this question, do we need to autoclave disposable personal protective equipment?
There are two thoughts to it. I believe that, and I also see the guidelines say that you do not require, you just dispose it in the yellow bag, depending on the material only. But there are different types of personal protectives. The kits, and as of now, as an emergency situation, people are getting kits from various places. Some of them are with plastic as a cover sheet on top of what they are wearing inside. That has to go into red. But other than that, your coverall, which are made of these polypropylene material that they have, that needs to go into the yellow. And this will be incinerated anyway. So you don't have to autoclave if you're not touching it. Some people say it is okay to destruct it and put, or you just make some few cuts in and dispose it so that it is not reusable by another person as such. So this is a recommendation. But however, there are some people who say, let me autoclave and put, but I personally feel, and it is by the guidelines, it says that you don't have to autoclave. You just put it in the yellow bin.
Dr. Shankar has a very nice, simple question. Is BS2 with incinerator can replace exhaust?
Yes, sir. But the 2A, sir, 2A type? It's a 2A. Oh, I can't hear him. Okay.
BS2,
yeah.
biosafety 2 with incinerator can replace exhaust?
But you have to look at the safety issues in all of these before you have them, but they are available too. But the preferred is to have those with an exhaust with a HEPA filter. In fact, the specification is have them at least 3 meters away from your wall and 3 meters above your roof so that you exhaust it completely on top with a filter on top. Yes.
According to Central Pollution Control Board, recent norms, incinerator is a banned technology, should not be used in public places. Instead, what is called hydroclaves can be used, like Tata Memorial is using. Suresh is asking, our CAHO, are you going to conduct one more session like this? Many of my friends are missing.
They can see it live. I think the recorded one will be available later also. I'm not very sure, but I think yes, this will be available later.
Can pathologists authorize this report is a question. Both microbiologists, Dr. Jayalakshmi, and what do you feel?
So I'm a very passionate clinical microbiologist, sir, and I want only clinical microbiologists to authorize. However, if the pathologist is competent and they have done and they are
This is from
they are competent enough,
Smita
sir,
Surke from I don't know where.
and
Juhi
if they're
Bhatia.
competent,
How many phlebotomists and transcripts, tests required? I think whomsoever is already there in the lab should be sufficient, isn't it? Or do
you have to just
appoint?
train them. You have to train them depending on the load that you are getting. Like now you said, sir, there are sample numbers are low. Slowly the numbers will increase. The testing will increase, and when the numbers increase, you need to have more people. And people who were trained in sample collection of blood need to be trained in collecting nasopharyngeal and oropharyngeal swabs in a way that it is described. And it's a good practice to have a pictorial representation of the same in a collection area so that they can have a look at it also. And that has to be done, and definitely a competency assessment done before placing them in those areas, because you're putting them to risk of infection also.
This is a very interesting demand from our delegates to both NABL as well as CAHO. They're asking, can you please provide us with certificate about this webinar for us attending? I think this can be answered separately by two people. Right now, I don't know what to say. See, during online assessment, whole area RNA extraction procedure to be shot as video?
Okay, this assessment process, because of lack of time, we were not able to describe you in detail. Like what Dr. Ashvini had mentioned, we need to have devices so that they are able to demonstrate to us the exact activity. So I usually tell them don't have more than 3 or 4 because the bandwidth reduces and we are not able to hear very clearly and the pictures are very distorted. So it's preferred to have 3 or 4, but focus on areas whatever is being performed at that point of time and what we are seeing. So it is at the sample collection area, we will see the sample collection entire process. So as if we are standing there and seeing, such a view is what we will have. But there would be little flaws in this because the person standing behind can prompt, all that can happen, but these are part of the system we have to accept. But at the extraction process, we always ask them, another person who's donned, who's plays hold a device and continuously relay whatever is happening and tell. So there is one person performing, another person in fact commenting or giving a live commentary of whatever is happening, and we are able to ask them questions because the person who's wearing these personal protectives like the N95 mask and the face shield, they will not be able to talk and their voice is muffled. We may not be able to hear them very clearly. So we always take assistance of the another technical staff. So both their competencies are assessed at the same time. And we look at the entire activity, see how they are performing, all that is done. Then we follow the entire sample, the activity, the process. We go through a lab tour using these devices. And when loaded onto the thermocycler, the machine itself, or the Gene Expert or the TrueNut, whatever is the device that you have, so there is a device that is placed, stationed, continuously monitoring the entire process till that it gets over. And we use the same device for taking help of the authorized signatory who would come and comment on the report also. So they would look at it and validate the report and give their comments and give a report of the test. And this is happening live. So there are some goods also. Here we are able to see that person perform and we are able to ask them specific questions at the point of time also. So it is not so bad at all. And now with few assessments, the NABL, like I told you earlier, the entire team that's coordinating at the back, they do a preparation audit so well that there are some flawless assessments also. There are sometimes you have some glitches, both technical as well as personal related, which are handled.
See, as the program coordinator, I was given time up to only 5 o'clock. Out of 87 questions, only 34 questions we could answer. And there are many more questions. I am sure we will send you the answers because we have already crossed 5:35, as 5:30 now. Half an hour we have extended. Very interesting session, excellent speakers, wonderful information. Hats off to you. And some of you have given the take-home message. And I would like to add one take-home message for all of you. You see, if you look at our country, how many tests we have done per million? As on today, I got the information, 3,100 tests per today compared to something like 60,000 tests per million in USA. That means we are not really looking at the real situation. If we had done something like 60,000 tests per million, I don't know what would have been what was the test requirement. Now, with just 600 plus testing centers, wherein they are doing maximum 200, 300 tests per day, many of them, because they have to do the other tests also. The laboratory is not only dedicated to the COVID testing, they have to do routine biochemistry and other microbiology. There are challenges, there are opportunities. Thanks to our NABL Venkateswaran for sparing your time, valuable time. I know how busy you are in giving us the needs and objectives, uniqueness of online assessment, process and timeline, and you have also elaborated on people and commitment from NABL. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Venkateswaran, for your participation and giving clarity, you know. For probably in my last so many years of association with NABL, first time I'm sitting and getting a very with great clarity to how many people? Something like 300 plus people who are participating in this. With how many speakers? Only 3 speakers. Dr. Jayalakshmi as an assessor representing 900 assessors, and Dr. Ashvini representing assessee. Every lab has 10, 15 assessees when the assessment is going on. And if you look at the number of assessees, you have done a great job, Dr. Ashvini. Thank you very much. And friends, there is a challenge ahead of us. India ranks very low as far as testing facility is concerned as on today. And we need, it has taken 65 days to go from 52 testing labs to 688 testing labs. I don't know how many days it will take to go up to 6,800 testing labs in this country. We need commitment. We need to have passion. And all of you who are delegates, please come forward. Convince your management. Create facilities. You are given very clear hand-holding guideline by our experts like Dr. Ashvini and Jayalakshmi. Feel free to interact with them even after this webinar. CAHO is there as a great coordinator between the laboratory and our accreditation body. Please go ahead and see that more and more people of our country, even in the rural area, need not travel to urban areas. Facility should be at taluka level. This is my take-home message. Very soon, I would like to see at taluka level COVID testing facilities established by corporates as well as by the government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you so much to Dr. T. Venkatesh. In fact, made it so much interacting, and then a lot of informative things have been told by him. Thank you so much, Dr. Venkatesh. Thanks a lot, Dr. Jayalakshmi, our assessor. I'm very, very happy and thankful to her. And thanks a lot, Dr. Ashvini also. In fact, thanks to CAHO and Dr. Shankar Sengupta, very much person who wanted this to happen. So, real thanks to CAHO and Dr. Shankar Sengupta and the team.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.